Everybody, it's that time again. It's time for the Very Terrible Podcast with me, Jason, on a solo show today where B Spike on the mic is out and away. So today's episode, and it's been a while once again because I'm not good at doing this very often, is we had some issues come up at work, and we're just doing a roundtable discussion about different philosophies of management and different leadership techniques and different methods of communication. And what ended up happening is that one of the younger people that are on the department asked me just a roundabout way, how did you learn all this stuff? And it got me thinking of all the management talk I like to do and the leadership discussions and the circles that I'm fortunate to be a part of. I never realized I had a whole history of this. My entire working life, in some capacity or another, has been in management positions. If you go back till, I think it was season 2, we had what was called the Middle Management Minute, and it was one of the stories I had from work, and then I went in and just kind of, looked at it from a management point of view and a leadership point of view, and you can beat things up. Leadership and management are different things. They can be executed by you in your job as well. You can be a manager, you can be a leader. They are not exactly the same, but you can absolutely do both, depending on what the situation is. So it got me thinking, I've never really told the stories of where I came from and what I do and how I got here. So what we're going to have today is we're going to start the middle manager, history of the middle management, part 1, from French fries to Florida skies. And this is where I started from McDonald's at very young, at 15 years old, making my way eventually down to the state of Florida. So join me in time travel, if you will, going back to 1992. In 1992, I was about 15 years old, and in the state of New York, you would have to have what was called a working card. And it was literally a cardboard card, and you'd keep it in your wallet. And what it would do is it would excuse you from, in your senior year of high school, and I think your junior year of high school, it would excuse you out of school early. If you were driving after hours, because from 15 to 18, you weren't allowed to drive after, I believe it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night. If you carried this working card, you could show, yes, I'm working, here is where I'm working, here is what I'm doing. And if I haven't mentioned it in these podcasts before, where I am from in upstate New York, there's not a lot going on. It's miserable. It was a miserable place as far as, finding things to do, at least in the lifestyle that we live now. You obviously, chronologically, you didn't have cell phones. You didn't have all the high-tech video games. You didn't have the big screen, high-def TVs. You had a lot of playing out in the woods and figuring it out, So I was very excited as a young man to go off and learn the ways of the workforce. And I was raised in a household where my father absolutely taught us that work equals money, and if you want money, you have to go out and earn it. So, at 15, I don't have a driver's license yet. I don't have a car yet, but I have the desire and the need to go out and, get out of the house, go make some money, and save up for this car and get my life moving. Because as I looked around, I realized, even at an early age, this wasn't where I was going to end up. It's one of the few things I tell people, one of the few things that was really good about Facebook is that you can get on there and it's like time travel. Go on to Facebook if you're not from the area that you live in now, and go find your friends you went to high school with. So for me, I can go and look at my friends in high school, and I can see that, we aged very differently. I mean, upstate New York was just gray. The sky is always gray. I can go on to any of the, the school's Facebook pages, the volunteer fire department Facebook pages. I can go, and you look at all the pictures, I promise you, the sky is gray. I don't even get it. We had a month and a half of blue skies every year, and that's all we had. It was just dreary all the time, but I didn't know any better. I just figured, that's the sky. So I just, I wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to get things moving. I wanted to do things. And, it's a very wide open, spread open space up there. It's not very densely populated. All of my friends lived quite far away. You couldn't just ride your bike to their house. You had to go find rides and get, things that you had to inconvenience people to get you places. It was just a pain. So I realized this was going to be the direction I was going to go, and we're going to go out and look for jobs. So reluctantly, my mother takes me out, going and hunting for jobs, filling out old school applications, something else that doesn't get done anymore. And I'm going around and I'm filling out applications at the grocery store. We had, I think it was called Ames. It was kind of like our equivalent of a Walmart before Walmart was around. Department stores. We had there was like a music store I really liked, but I couldn't get into there because I wasn't old enough. And then like the last stop on the way around was McDonald's. And I just remember clear as day my mother saying, "I really don't want you to get this job." And I don't know why. I mean, I guess I look back and I can see why. But it's fast food. It is the proverbial first job. And this is something that I bring up when we talk about salaries and minimum wage and everything else. And the people at McDonald's need $20 an hour and on and on. It's honestly not meant for that. Doing the job, I can tell you, it's not meant for that. I don't have to have a political stance. I don't have to have a ideology issue. It's just a matter of this job is made for the very basic humans getting out on their own for the first time. Everything is fed to you. It's simply, here's how we make a hamburger. Here are the toppings. Here's how you toast it. Here's how you put it in. Do not deviate. Just get it done. It's very simple. It was very, very simple. And if memory serves me correctly, I only got paid like $3.75 an hour because that was minimum wage at the time. But they're the ones that called back. I go through the interview and I get this job, the one place that my mother didn't want me to work. This job, this restaurant now, once again, because nothing's close, it was quite far away. And even with a working card at 15 years old, you could only work, I think it was like 15 or 20 hours a week. Was it 8 or 10 hours on the weekend, only up to 6 hours a day? I mean, there were so many different little caveats to it. But either way, I had a job and I'm going to start making money. Looking back at it now, I was even paying into Social Security back then, which really works out into the whole life plan that I've got going on now, because you need so many years of paying into Social Security before you can collect the benefit. So off I go into this different part of town, the next city over. And what I can tell you is that I grew up in a very rural country area, and this McDonald's was in the more city urban area. And I, come in from one, like we had neighboring school districts. My school district didn't even have a football team because all we did was like hillbilly redneck stuff. They had baseball and track and field and cross country, and that was about all we got into sports. And then basketball. And then otherwise than that, they had everything over at the city school at the next district over. And they had a state level championship football team. They had everything going on, but it was a very urban school, right? In my school was predominantly white. There were very few African American students in my school. I go over to the next school district to go to work there, and it's predominantly African American. There are very few white people over in that school, and it's geographically just kind of the way it worked out. It wasn't like they took a line and went, okay, everybody on this side of the fence here and that side of the fence there. It was just kind of the way the map worked out. It was country on one side, a very long ways of corn and apple orchards, and then there was the urban area afterwards. So that's the way that worked out. But what a great experience that was getting outside of that comfort zone and learning about different people and different cultures and different music. And I never even heard of Wu-Tang Clan before I got over there, and I haven't looked back since. So it was absolutely awesome to get over there. And to be honest with you, I actually fit in better over there. Growing up, I was not very popular, and people will tell you that I'm not popular now by the tens of people that listen to my podcast. But I got over there and I fit in, and I was able to kind of learn about myself and make new friends, and I got my first girlfriend from the working at McDonald's, and it was like I could actually be somewhat social and popular, and it was actually kind of a great experience that way. But you get into this restaurant where you learn how to make French fries, and you're like the first day you get on fries, and then they move you over to chicken nuggets and filet of fish and chicken sandwiches, and then eventually you work your way over to hamburger. And it's not even like it's a big deal. Like, it's not like there's a ceremony or anything like that, but you knew who everybody was by where they were working. The guy frying the meat, and we didn't have warming stuff back then. You actually made everything fresh at the time. Like when he was over on the grill, what we called it, he knew everything already. That was the leader of the group, and you had like a implied social hierarchy that went backwards all the way down to, spinner on the nuggets on his first day. So there was ways you earned your keep and you earned your way up through it. But from 15 to 16 to 17, I learned every position. And after a while, I was kind of ushered into, hey, look at this. He actually shows up and he doesn't call in and he's not drinking on the job and on and on. And I got welcomed into the management circle. And I got kind of shown like, hey, do you want to learn how to do inventory? So I would come in one weekend and I learned how to do inventory. And it's simple. You're just counting things. It's not like it's science. You go and you count things. But then afterwards, when you get done with all the counts, you got to go see all the paperwork. And all the paperwork had like the real costs of things. One of the most mind-boggling facts I've ever seen about McDonald's. Now, granted, this is, we'll call it, say, 1994. And in 1994, it was, what was it called? It's when you own a franchise. The franchise owners, they had a cost sheet of what everything cost. It cost them 11 cents to make a Big Mac. After the buns, after the grill, after the payroll, the rent, and the contracts to McDonald's, every Big Mac only cost them 11 cents to make. And you would sell this Big Mac as a sandwich by itself for probably $1.99 and as a value meal at $3.23 or $3.75. I mean, now you can't touch that with a stick, but it just the mind-boggling facts of, oh God, look at the money they're making. They were just raking in profits. I mean, their biggest seller sandwich was 11 cents to make. Are you kidding me? And they're selling it for $2. So you started to see like, oh, there's a lot of money behind this. And at Christmas time every year, the owners would come in, and they would bring the management gifts. It was LL Bean cashmere sweaters, and down in Florida, we don't have any need for any of that. I don't even know if LL Bean's still in business anymore, but it was LL Bean cashmere sweaters, and then the store manager got like stocks or something like that for Christmas, and they were big dollar things. But they would go out and give little gift cards and whatever it is to the rest of the crew. They had lots and lots of money. I had no idea the scale in which they had until later on. You start to see behind the curtain, and then you meet other franchisees with multiple restaurants, and McDonald's would then put a limit on how many restaurants they could have because people were just raking in so much money. But I was welcomed into that circle, and so 15, 16, 17, and you just keep plugging away. But you sit there and through osmosis, you just learn all these different skills. This is no different than the job that you have now, and I don't care what it is that you do. Whether you're running a McDonald's, or you're working in a grocery store, or you're at a fire department, or you're a police officer, or you're a social worker, it doesn't matter. You show up. First thing you do is you show up and you start to learn, and people will show you. So that's what ended up happening with me. You're smart enough to do the paperwork, but dumb enough to not realize you're probably getting screwed out of the pay in the process. So years and years of that, and I built relationships and friendships that I still have to this day with people online, because geographically we're not anywhere near each other anymore. But I learned every lesson, and I started to watch and learn management styles. And at the time, the store manager was, when I first met him, and as a young person, he was the no fun guy. He was the one that if you smiled too much, he'd yell at you. So his name was Tony Skype. And Tony Skype, God rest his soul, he passed away years ago. And I put a whole thing on Facebook about it, because when we were young and we were just young kids in there, my God, he would just, beat us as far as, the work would be concerned. And then later on, when I learned his management style, and I learned about him as a person, and I learned about all the challenges it takes to run a restaurant that's basically being run by kids, to deal with the stuff that you had to deal with, and to be the area that we were in, I learned to actually really appreciate all the time that he had spent with me. And he had one expression, and I didn't, once again, you don't get it at the time, but you'd be working your tail off or whatever, and you'd have fun and get yelled at, because that's what he did. And he looked at me and he says, you don't have to like me, but you do have to respect the position I hold. And I never really understood it until years and years later, because at the end I did end up liking him, because I got to understand about who he was as a person, and then all the responsibilities and the things that come with being in charge. But every management team, if you have more than, say, 2 or 3 supervisors, they are not going to be carbon copies of one another. They always have this yin-yang relationship to them. So I had there was like 2 or 3 characters that were at my fast food restaurant. There was Tony, there was Derek, and there was Linda, and there was somebody that Derek ended up knocking up, and I don't remember her name. But each one had a different management style. Like Derek had to be liked, and Linda had to be the mom to everybody, and Tony had to be the hard ass, and everybody did that. But that puzzle piece fits so together. It fits so well that you kind of understood, like, oh, there's different personality styles. So eventually, and then I can tell you through my own progression, I would eventually be all of those things. I would want to be liked, so I wanted to be the social one. So I wasn't very good at discipline. I wasn't very good at holding the line because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And then I wanted to be the one to take care of people later on, and like, oh no, I'll do things and I'll help you out, and I'll be the dad that nobody ever had. And then I was able to take different situations, and then there's days I have to be Tony, and I have to say, listen, I get it, you don't like it, but this is where we're going, and this is what we're doing. And all of these things started from a very young age at a fast food restaurant in upstate New York. And so 18 comes around, and on my 18th birthday, right before the school year let out, I was given what was called the blue shirt, and the blue shirt was the assistant manager outfit. And I know it sounds hilarious and it doesn't matter at all, but it was a big deal to a kid who just didn't have much to start with and started at the bottom. And it goes, here's your first set of store keys. Here is your blue shirt. You're going to go off to McDonald's manager school. And I know what you're thinking, right? Like, how the hell can there be a McDonald's manager school? But there really is an actual place that I had to drive to for a week every day, sit down in a classroom, and actually have the corporation teach me, here's the paperwork. Here's how you do the cash. Here's how you make the deposits. Here's the payroll. Here's the schedules. Here's everything you need to know. So you go through all this training, and you're just, once again, you just show up. You show up and you soak it all in. And, things were going well. And so at 18, I'm like, well, but this is not what I'm going to do the rest of my life. This is a starter job. This is not where I'm supposed to do. So I made a decision. I was going to try some different career options, and there were some different things in my life going on. So I tried some different paths. None of them worked out. So guess what? There's always that safety net, right? Because at the end of the day, if you've got nowhere else to go, minus any heinous crimes, McDonald's is going to take you back. So I went back in the manager spot, like nothing ever left, and we just went right back to work. And so I'm like, okay, trying to figure life out. I'm moving out. I'm on my own. I'm partly in charge of an assistant manager of a restaurant, and everything was just kind of clicking away. And with any fast food location in the area that I was in, of course, you're going to end up getting robbed, and that's what happened to us one night on a cash deposit. So we had our restaurant, and we had a house of a usual drug running house that was behind the restaurant, maybe 2 or 3 lots back. And one of the things that they did teach us in manager school, which I did not pay attention to, was do not get in a pattern. If you get in a pattern and if you ever in a position that you have a job where you can be robbed for cash, do not get in a pattern. And that's exactly what we did. They watched us day after day after day doing the exact same thing, and almost like clockwork, they figured out when to rob us. And it was when we were making the cash deposits. So me and there was another manager named Suzanne. We drive across the street to the bank. She takes the bank bag, walks up to, and this is it, you had cash back in the day. There was these cash deposit doors, I guess, like on the side of the building. And it was a little drop box, and you put it in kind of like you do at the post office for packages. And you'd shut the door, the thing would drop behind the wall, and that's how you dropped off the cash. So it's maybe 11:30 or midnight. I give her the bag. She walks around the back of my car, and all of a sudden the bag flies back in, hits the coffee that's in my hand. Coffee comes up in my face, and all I see is this gun to my head, and the guy goes, "Give me the effing money now." So I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's hero time. This is where no, absolutely not. I gave him that bag quick as anything. I was like, nope, here you go. Off you go. Just get out of here. They did. They grabbed the bag of money. They ran off. Picked up Suzanne, called the police on a landline. There were no cell phones back then. We had to drive back to the restaurant thinking we're going to get jumped again the entire time. Get back in the restaurant, lock ourselves back inside, call the police. Have to call the owners. And yet now comes another lesson in where you are in the food chain, because now I was responsible for the $3,711.46. I still remember how much was in that envelope to this day. And the owner came up to me afterwards and he says, I want you to tell the police that you don't remember how much was in the bag. And I couldn't figure it out at the time. I'm like, what do you mean you did? I know exactly how much is in the bag. He's like, just tell him you don't remember how much was in the bag. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing whatever this is. And I didn't even understand what was going on at the time. He had insurance and he was going to make a larger claim than what was in the bag. And I'm like, after learning that, I then realized where my importance was on the pecking order and how I was very much disposable at that time. I can tell you, like, you don't understand how worthless you feel when someone's ready to cash you out for $3,000 and asking you to lie to the police. So we didn't do that. We settled the exact amount. Whatever happened after that. But in the following months, I decided, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. It was just, there was a psychological effect to it. Every night trying to do the cash deposit a different way, a different style, always watching. We had the police show up for the first, I think, 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. It was just a really weird time. So I decided, we're not going to do this. So my apartment was back toward where my grandmother lived, in a different part of town, but way, way back in the country part. So it was like, say, a 40-minute drive from where that McDonald's restaurant was to where I lived. And once again, in that part of town, everyone knows everyone. And I was talking around to the people in that neighborhood about my experience, and come to find out, the owner of a custom car place that is, window tints and lowriders and stereo speakers. And at the time when you're, 18, 19 years old, that's fun stuff. So he, we started talking all that. He was like, hey, I could use some help at the shop. Why don't you come over to the shop? Immediately I'm thinking I can cut ties with all of this, thinking I'm going to get robbed every day for hamburgers and all the stuff that happened. Absolutely, I'm going to go ahead and go. So I cut my ties with McDonald's, taking with me the experience and all the things I learned, getting to that point, going on to the next location. Now, this next location doesn't have a whole lot of manager experience. It literally was a local car shop with the owner and 2 of us working there. So there's not like there was I was obviously the very bottom person. There was a guy who was sort of in charge of different areas, but not really in charge of me. I was the sales clerk / assistant installer of whatever I couldn't screw up by touching, because I, have no experience in those areas. But I learned, and I learned a different methodology of business. Local, small business, no corporation, dealing with different styles of customers, dealing with customer complaints everywhere, right? You have customer complaints at McDonald's, you'd have customer complaints at this place, except when you had a customer complaint at a custom car shop, it's because you cut one of the brake lines on their car by accident, or you scratched their paint, or something really, really bad. But I got to learn a lot about business, about dealing with customers, about speaking to people, maintaining those business relationships when you have to lean on people to get what you need, to get the jobs done. It was really it was a very interesting and great learning experience. But that was only maybe like a year long. And in upstate New York, at the time, George Pataki was the new governor. He implemented small business taxes that was choking the business out. We didn't have any choice but to say, okay, this isn't working out anymore, because you can only sell so much window tint. You can only sell so many lowriders in upstate New York, in the country area where nobody really wants them. And then we would do snowplow lifts in the winter, or snowplows in the winter, with handicap mobility lifts in between. So we had like this hodgepodge of how can we make money? And it was good to be in that environment of, oh God, how do we make money? So we decided to say, okay, this isn't going to work. The owner's father lived in Englewood, Florida. Where are there any more people that you can imagine that need wheelchair lifts more than Englewood, Florida? Off we go. So I visited my parents, and I said, hey, I know it's Tuesday, but on Friday I'm moving to Florida. To which my mother collapses in a state of disappointment that cannot be measured. My father, it was really cool. He goes, go get me the calendar off the wall. So I go through, I give him the family calendar, and he flips ahead, and he goes, okay, I think it was November-ish, I think, at the time when I told him. And he says, yeah, all right. He goes, your mom's birthday is in August. You'll be back by August. And something just clicked, and I said, you know what? I'll die dead broke in a ditch in Florida before I come back here. And it was like a challenge, but I think he knew what he was doing. I think he knew that by showing me like almost like hey, you aren't man enough to make it, I was going to make it, and which is essentially, I think, what he wanted too. So I dug my car out of a snowbank on a Friday afternoon. We hooked up trailers, we put everything we owned into them, and we drove from upstate New York down to Englewood, Florida with all of my life possessions. And that was my upstate New York management experience that I would then bring into Florida, which will then eventually lead us into part 2, where I will then go through my first jobs in Florida, working my way back up into, you guessed it, middle management. So thank you so much. We're about half an hour in. I just wanted to say that's the inception of where I come from. And hopefully over this the next 2 parts that we're going to do, I'll be able to share with you some of the insight of the things I've experienced and the lessons I've learned along the way to show you that, honestly, there's not much difference between running a McDonald's, running a grocery store, and running a firehouse. It's payroll, it's scheduling, it's HR issues. It's just trying to keep everybody safe at times. But hopefully that'll be something you enjoy. But like I said, this one here is from French fries to the state of Florida. This was Middle Management Minute, the history of the middle manager, part 1. I'm Jason without B again. And that is our music. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.